Okay guys, as you can see, things are serious. We've got the drive in the house, and we're going to be checking on our first repair and also doing a bigger rebuild on this. When I first started this video, we thought once we replaced the water pump, everything would be fine and dandy. We'd get this boat in for about one more season, and then I would do a full-on rebuild. But obviously that's not happening. What we did was we replaced the water pump. As you guys saw, the first few half of that, we put it back together, we tested it. It was not just the water pump. We still weren't getting water and stuff, so something went wrong. Either this repair went wrong or something in the other part of the system went wrong. So, it doesn't look like this boat is really going anywhere anytime soon. So with that being said, we are going to be doing a full teardown, rebuild, and stuff, even further than what we did last time. Not only replacing seals and everything, but we're going to be repainting all this stuff. We are going to get this drive back to its former glory, and we're going to be working on it here. So first things first is getting started on checking our repair. So that's what we're going to be dealing with. We're going to start by taking the cover off the upper gear housing and stuff, then separating lower housing from this upper housing, checking down in here, checking the water intakes, all of that stuff. A lot of stuff will be going on, and you guys are going to learn a little bit about inboard outboard drives, and I'll be learning a few things too, so let's get to it. So first things first, what we're going to do is we're going to remove this top cover. This top cover has to come off before we can remove anything else from this drive, okay? And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to remove this oil fill plug here. And it's also going to have a small O-ring in there that you don't want to forget about, okay? We want to keep those together. We want to keep that intact so that it can go back together. We have a nice seal, okay? So then once we have that up and out of the way, we're going to be loosening these 3/8 bolts all the way around. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts in total that we'll be loosening up. And they come into the drive quite a bit, a few inches. And so then we'll take those bolts out and take this cover off here. Okay, so when you take this cover off, there's a few things you need to take note of. One is the 2 washer and spring assembly that sits inside of the cover. The cover actually presses down upon this. Okay, one will be on top, there'll be a spring in the middle, and one sitting right here. Alright. The second is this spring and tab. Note the exact position that it's in. It needs to go exactly the same way, just the way it's designed. And this is to keep the shift cable from catching anywhere or getting bound in something. This is a very important piece and a very expensive piece, so you want to keep note of this spring and this plastic tab. You'll remove these here, and you will also remove this here. So this is the shift cable here, and it actually goes through the drive, down into the drive here, up, and then through the intermediate housing into the boat, where then there's another connection that it connects to, and then that's where we can shift, reverse, and forward. Okay, so now we're pretty much in the front of the drive here. And this upper gear case housing, which we're trying to separate from the lower gear case housing right now, has everything off of it. The cover, the shift cables, all that stuff, okay? So this thing can literally lift out of the lower gear housing now because it's just a shaft that goes into some splines, okay? So it can now literally lift out of here, which we're going to do. We're going to take the upper gear housing off of the lower gear housing here, and then you guys can see inside of the lower gear housing a little bit, and we'll take a look into that. But this is pretty much as far as I want to go today. The biggest thing what I wanted to do is get this off of here so it's a little more stable on the stand, and I'm not really worried about it while I'm off and away. Okay, now the upper gear housing is off of this lower gear housing. We've got the upper gear housing in a milk crate right now, and this is what actually holds the water pump. So we are going to have to work on this separately and check what's going on here, and figure out why this water pump, one, is not pumping, or something's clogged, or if something is going on down in this lower gear housing, which may be the case here. There's an intake tube in here which we need to check and stuff. This is actually plastic washer that needs to go in here, so we're going to put that way. There's a lot of things that can be going on in here that we need to figure out, but biggest thing is we need to get everything ready for painting and figure out this water pump here. So okay guys, so this is the upper gear housing right here, and so the water pump is actually inside of this upper gear housing, inside this cylinder here. So what we need to do is we need to remove all of these internals and slip them out this way, right? So we have the ball gear, which is connected to a mesh gear, which is changing the horizontal shaft down to a vertical shaft. Okay, so we need to take that off. We then need to remove the bolts here that go onto the underside of the water pump. Slip that off. This actually has some gasket on it, gasket maker on it, that is called out in the book. So it'll be a little hard. We're gonna have to tap on this a little bit to get this out of here, but I'm sure we can do it. We've done it before. And then once that's all pulled out, we'll have the water pump assembly, which we then can look at and see if there's any problems in there. Okay, so one thing to know about when you take this ball gear off, okay, as you can see between this piece of metal and the housing, there's some shims. Okay, these are plastic shims. You need to remember what color they are and how they're stacked, okay, and try to replace them, because they will put this gear that's on the other side of this ball gear in the correct position to mesh with this shaft here. It's very important to replace your shims and make sure it is exactly as it was before. Alright guys, so we took the ball gear assembly out of the upper gear housing, and here it is. This meshes up with this gear right here, as you can see, and that's why it's important with those shims. Even if it's off just a millimeter, you'll start grinding gears. And we've actually run this thing with the new pump and shims in, and all the gears look good. So that makes me think that our shim work is also good. So we're going to continue with this. We have this. Now we can remove the water pump assembly from the bottom. We removed all 4 bolts on the bottom and the swivel housing cap. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now. Let's release this out. So far, I've looked back here and the water pump looks just fine and looks completely good. So that means something else is an issue. Okay guys, so we have removed the water pump and the water pump housing from the upper gear housing, okay? So this is where the water pump sits in, and this is the chamber that actually fills up with, not this chamber itself, but inside of here, inside of this, yeah, all these cylinders, you know, it's hollow in here. So that fills up with water. The housing of the water pump fills up with water, and then it pushes it up through here. So that is what we have to check. The biggest thing is we cleaned these out. This needed a lot of cleaning. The biggest thing is that this may have a clog in it, or something of that nature. So what we need to do is we need to remove this housing and really clean all this out and blow it out, acetone it, I mean really snake through it and make sure that there's no big sediment clogs in here. This is the number one thing that I want to look at that could be clogging it. The second is the intake of this here. There's a possibility that this tube ruptured with the pump being out, if it overpressured, etc. And it's also possible that it is clogged. So we'll go through that. If it is none of these issues, really don't think it's with the drive, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the cooling system inside of the boat. But this is where we are working. We already know this had spun the shaft. We already know, I've looked at this, this is installed correctly. It is perfect. It is still on the shaft. It is still spinning. So the water pump is not the problem. It's time to move on to other stuff. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this housing off the lower gear case. This is the exhaust housing here, okay? And so what we have to do is we have to pull the shift cable through. So we have to grease this up, pull this through. It's going to be kind of tough, honestly. We have to be very careful. And then what we're going to have to do on the other side, this is the rudder. We have to mark the rudder so that when we place the rudder, it's there in the exact same position as before, so it's not, you know, doing anything wonky. And then we can go ahead and do the bolts on the other side, take all that out, and take this exhaust housing off. Okay, so we have taken off this plate here and the rudder right there, and I marked the rudder to put it in its exact position. There is a mark on this plate. We gotta line those two up. But to get this housing off of the lower housing here, we need one more bolt, and that is in there. I don't know if you can see it. It's right in the back there behind this water pickup tube. So we need to take that off, and then this housing can separate from the lower gear housing. Okay guys, we got the top exhaust housing off of the lower gear case here. And when it is on here, after you take out all the bolts, it'll be sitting on there like this, of course, and it'll be a little tough. Hammer it off just a tad bit, it's okay. As long as you got all the bolts out. Remember, all of the bolts on the side here, and then you're gonna have to take the rudder and plate off the bottom and take this nut off right here. Once all those nuts are off, it is ready to come off. Like I said, you might have to tap it a little bit with a hammer and a block of wood, and it should pop right off of there. So this is pretty much as far as we're gonna be going. As okay guys, so we are prepping right now for sandblasting, and pretty much this is the upper gear case here. And what we want to do is we want to cover all the holes and all the protrusions that go inside of the case, so that we don't get sand stuck in there and everything. We just want to blast all the paint off in these areas so that we can reprime and repaint. I also taped up this gear here. It's a little bit finer, the teeth and stuff like that, so the sandblasting might beat it up a bit. Big gears like the trim gear here and stuff, I mean, the sand's not going to eat away at those teeth, so it's not a big deal. We also covered up here at the end caps. This is actually part of the water system, so we don't want sand going in there and getting stuck on that and everything. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is also remove these caps here, paint these separately, and then also tape that up. So we got a little bit of work to do there. But just use blues painter tape and stuff like that, just so that when you're sandblasting around that and everything, it just hits the tape and stays off of the metal and stuff like that. This is also what happens here is there's shims on this part of the upper case, right? This is where the ball gear comes in. So we also don't want to repaint that. We don't want to sandblast that, change that in any way, because when we put those shims and stack them on top, we want it to be exactly the same. We don't want those gears to mesh differently, start grinding, etc. So we're not going to paint the top of this here where the shims sit on top, and we're also not going to sandblast it. That's something else to think about for when you're doing that stuff. So we have a few other pieces to tape up. This is the top cover. I want to tape up the gear here and stuff like that so that doesn't get sandblasted while we're painting that. And then we also have to tape up the lower gear case here. What I want to do is I want to take some plastic and stuff, just tape it across, cover all this, and then also tape and cover the bottom so that when we sandblast it from the bottom and everything, nothing gets all up in here. This is part of the exhaust, so it's not a huge deal. If a little bit of sand gets in, it'll get pushed out or something, but we really don't want it in there. We're minimizing it as much as possible, so that's why we're going to tape it up.